Political analyst Javed Rana is joining us now from Islamabad. Good to have you in our program. Now, what are the core provisions of the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire agreement under President Trump's 20-point peace plan, including details on hostage releases and the timeline for implementation?
Well, at this particular point of time, the information that we have is very limited, other than the social media post of the President Donald Trump. Nonetheless, there are certain, something is clear, and that is that there would be an exchange of prisoners of war. I think that is extremely important. I think then there are also reports that there is a lot of agreements on other provisions of so-called 21 peace plan. At this particular point of time, we cannot say anything with sense of certainty, but it looks like that some kind of a mechanism has been discussed about the phase-wise withdrawal of Israeli troops from occupied Gaza. Now, what will be the mechanism? What is the timeline? This is anybody's guess. But there are certainly takeaway points. Those takeaway points are that the apartheid Israel has terribly failed to achieve its geostrategic objectives. Those were to eliminate Hamas altogether. I emphasize altogether, because that is something which was repeatedly declared by Tel Aviv. That has not happened. At the end of the day, apartheid Israel has ended up talking and negotiating with its arch enemy. I think that success goes to Hamas and other resistance groups in occupied Gaza. That is something extraordinary. And then I think all the information that so far I have monitored, that does suggest that the Hamas has also opposed a kind of a foreign body headed by Donald Trump, this Board of Peace, or the governor, accepting governor to Tony Blair, the former British Prime Minister. I think that has also been rejected. And that is, again, a great success. Hamas, it looks like there are reports, credible reports, suggesting that it is willing to hand over power to some Palestinian group, some coalition partners or Palestinian partners, not to any foreign body. I think it looks like that Hamas has played its card very smartly, and there are credible reports suggesting that Hamas has emphasized on one point, and that is that we need international guarantees. There has to be guarantors, international guarantors, to make it sure that Israel withdraws from all of the Gaza. Now, problem is that over the period of time, there is a pattern of Israel that has been breaching all the previous agreements. Forget about UN Security Council resolutions. Just look at what happened in January this year. Hamas had a deal, ceasefire agreement with Israel, and there was also a vague term about the phase-wise withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. At the end of the day, Hamas breached those agreements, and it opted to stay inside Gaza, and it resumed genocide. I think it looks like that the Hamas and its negotiators have learned from the past mistakes, and now this time around they have made it sure that there has to be a kind of a mechanism whereby it is made it sure that Israeli troops are withdrawn from all of the Gaza. So I think for that to happen, I think there are reports suggesting that Hamas was looking for some kind of a punitive action against Israel. And that punitive action, we should not attach our hopes that there would be some kind of military action against Israel. That is obviously unlikely to happen. And that punitive action could possibly mean some kind of sanction. Now, these were the kind of the points which were discussed during the course of negotiations. How many of them have been accepted by the Americans and how many of them have been accepted by the apartheid Israel, that is unclear. Today, as we speak, I think Israel's cabinet is going to meet and they are going to approve this deal. And very importantly, President Donald Trump himself is going to visit the Middle East and he's going to be in Tel Aviv and he's going to address Knesset, the Israeli parliament. And essentially, it looks like that the political career of Netanyahu, I think it looks like that it probably it is going to cease to exist. It is a simply matter of time because he was surviving by prolonging this genocide, which it looks like that it is going to come to an end. That is one point. And once it happens, then there will be investigations against him as to how this entire October 7 military operation by Hamas took place and what were the lapses. And despite the fact that they had intelligence about this attack, then the security forces and the intelligence operatives, they did not act, and Netanyahu was responsible. I think everything is going to come down very hard on Netanyahu. And then his corruption scandal is going to be reopened. He's already indicted. I think this, if he departs from the political scene of Israel, I think that would be some relief. But we have to understand that the entire Israeli society is a radicalized, it is a brainwashed. There is a no breath of extremist, fascist leaders like Netanyahu in Israel. So again, at this particular point of time, I have to emphasize the information is limited. So our analysis is going to be a bit with a sense of caution. We don't know what exactly is going to happen, but it looks like that there is going to be certainly an exchange of prisoners of war from the both sides. And let me remind you here that Hamas has just maybe 20 or 24 captives of Israel. And there are dozens others whose dead bodies and whose remains are with Hamas. But we should not forget there are 14,000 Palestinians who are still in custody of Israel. They are being tortured, not only physically, but also mentally. And many of them who were released during the previous ceasefire agreement, they turn out to be very abnormal because of the torture they have undergone. And there are at least 3,000 Palestinians who have been arrested without any charge. They call it an administrative charge. I mean, they can arrest anybody without any so-called crime. I don't think resistance is a crime. Nonetheless, Israeli forces have been capturing them. Now there will be an exchange. How many of them are exchanged? This is still a big question mark. Let's see how things unfold. But to begin with, I think geostrategically, I think Israel has lost this, and Hamas is there. It has not only survived, but I think it is going to thrive. And so far as the disarmament or demilitarization of Gaza is concerned, to the best of my understanding, that is unlikely to happen. Hamas may vanish from the scene, but it would stay there in the social fabric and it would not disarm itself.
Now, how did mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey contribute to bridging the gaps between Israel and Hamas during the Sharm el-Sheikh talks? And what role did U.S. involvement play in finalizing the deal?
I think regional countries have learned from the previous experience, and I think they have played very smartly. Turkey, to begin with, and Qatar, Egypt, all these players, I think they have learned from the past mistakes, and they did not trust Israel. I think the focal point of all the negotiators who negotiated on the behalf of Hamas, I think their focus has been not to trust whatever the Israel says, because Israel's policy has been, and there was a policy, still policy is there, whereby they wanted to basically secure the release of the prisoners of war. And once it happens, they will find some justifications, like that Hamas has not accepted to be disarm itself, and then they will resume bombing. I think it looks like now would be very difficult, because somehow the other, Israel was propagating that it is a bombing Gaza because Hamas has the prisoners of war. But I think that was not the case. Israel was not making any distinction between common innocent Palestinian and those of the Hamas armed group. That is something now is pretty known to the world. But now after this deal, if Hamas is attacked in a way that it is not disarmed, I think no one is going to accept that internationally. So it looks like that the Netanyahu has lost its all cards, and the role that has been played by the interlocutors on the behalf of Hamas, I think that was more based. It was a very intelligent move, and they accepted this 21-point plan by the President Donald Trump, essentially on the basis that once it is announced, once the ceasefire agreement takes place, then they will handle everything during the course of negotiations. And I think that is something which is extremely important, because this is where their focus was, that how to make it sure that Israel implements any peace plan. Let's not get into the bigger issues like two-state solution, because Israel has changed the situation on the ground in a very aggressive manner. They have, at least in the occupied West Bank, they have built up 2,000 housing units, and then they have also built up in military infrastructure there. And even in Gaza, as we speak, the negotiations were happening on one particular point, that Israel, under no circumstances, would go back from parts of Gaza which are bordering with Israel. And that means there is a 25 kilometer long territory, and that means it is a 140 square kilometer long stretch of the border with Israel. That Israel now calls it as a buffer zone. This is a bigger challenge. We don't know at this particular point of time what exact negotiations have held on this point, because Israel would certainly insist that it wants to retain 25 kilometer long stretch of the border, and that is a big territory. I mean, this obviously means that at least Israel want to retain 1/3 of Gaza. But I think what it looks like has wiped out, that was the plan of resettlement in Gaza. If this agreement is implemented, that means these settlements are not going to be there. The son-in-law of Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, was basically planning to have settlement on the coastal line, and something President Donald Trump, to begin with, a couple of months ago, he was also warning to the Palestinians that they need to leave Gaza, and there would be a settlement. Now again, there are still bigger questions about the reconstruction of Gaza. It will take at least 10 years, and there are going to be tens of billions of US dollars which are required to rebuild Gaza. And who is going to fund it? This is the problematic area. Now Donald Trump wants that the Arab Manoj should rebuild Gaza, which has been destroyed by Israel. I think under the international law, and it is a matter of common sense, that Israel deliberately destroyed the infrastructure of Gaza. So Israel must also bear the responsibility of actually reconstructing the entire Gaza. But this looks like it is unlikely to happen.
Now, what guarantees is Hamas seeking to ensure Israel adheres to the ceasefire terms, especially given past violations of previous truces in January and March 2025? How will it be different from other ceasefires?
I think this is a very, very important question. And that question comes into minds of everybody right now as we speak. But again, frankly speaking, at this particular point of time, the information is limited. But it looks like that something of that sort would have happened. But we can now analyze what that means could be. And I think probably there were initial reports suggesting that Hamas wants to release captives in a phase-wise manner as long as the last soldier of Israel is on Gaza's territory. everybody from the prisons of war, the captors would not be released. There would be a phase-wise release. I don't know if that has been accepted, but Hamas is basically asking for something bigger one, that there has to be some kind of a punitive action, and that action we can just assume could be economic sanctions, could be suspension of the military hardwares, could be possibly an assurance in the UN Security Council resolution backed by the US, which has been vetoing all previous resolutions, calling for some kind of action against Israel if it doesn't adhere to any peace agreement. But again, this is essentially a conjecture. At this particular point of time, we can analyze, we can speculate, but as long as the core part of the information is not released, it will be premature to conclude what would be that mechanism. But one thing is certainly clear, that this is a question which was very comprehensively discussed during the course of negotiations, and how far that question was addressed by the US interlocutors, how far that question was addressed by the Israel's interlocutors. This is anybody's guess. But given the fact that this time around, Donald Trump seems to be serious, given the fact that he's coming to Israel, and given the fact that he's going to address Israel's parliament, that means he's trying to create basically a situation inside Israel whereby somehow or the other Netanyahu is overshadowed politically, and let there be. It looks like that Donald Trump wants to create more public pressure inside Israel to have some kind of a peace agreement with Palestinians. Let's not get into the nomenclature of it is a Hamas or Palestinian Authority or any other group. And then also, again, something I previously said about, it looks like, I may be wrong at this particular point of time, I don't want to speculate, but it looks like that the Palestinian resistance groups would not accept Tony Blair as the governor of Gaza, because the actual plan has been that Donald Trump, along with Tony Blair, they want to govern Israel. They want Muslim countries' troops like Turkey, Egypt, Pakistan, Jordan, Saudi Arabia's troops being deployed inside Gaza. They essentially, Israel through USA is putting pressure on the Muslim countries to demolish the hundreds of kilometer-long tunnels, something which Israel has terribly failed to do. And they want Muslim countries' troops to disarm Hamas, something Donald Trump publicly said. It's something on record. So all I'm saying is, I think my understanding is the countries like Turkey, Pakistan, they are probably playing very smartly. I mean, they would like their troops to be inside Gaza, but not to disarm Hamas, but not to take any punitive action against any resistance group. They want to be there as a peacekeeper force. But at the same time, there are genuine problems, particularly countries like Pakistan, which does not have a diplomatic ties with Israel. They don't want to talk with the Israeli troops. If Pakistani troops are supposedly there, if they are deployed, they cannot talk to Israeli journalists. They cannot talk to the Israeli military in any way, because Pakistan doesn't have any diplomatic communication with the apartheid Israel. So I think, again, those are the part of the plan. We don't know at this particular point of time. We should not forget that the reference of a two-state solution was not there in the 21 peace plan. There is only a reference of self-determination by Palestinian. Again, this is a vague term. And again, then at a time when Netanyahu has been saying time and again after this peace agreement that there would be no two-state solution. Now, the bigger trouble is that if there is no two-state solution, then what is going to be the shape of the Middle East in this crisis? Because if there is a one-state solution, that let Palestinians be given their right of vote. Now, the fear is that if Palestinians are given the equal right of vote, then their population would overgrow, and then they will be the one who may be governing Israel in near future. So because of these apprehensions, everything is hanging in balance in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. Reason being is that neither Israel wants to give them a voting right under one-state solution, and nor Israel wants to give to make a separate state for the Palestinian. Now, yes, nearly 160 countries have recognized Palestine as a state, but that is something which is theoretical. It is not there on the ground because Israel is controlling everything. Israel is controlling all the civilian affairs of the occupied West Bank. Gaza is already under occupation, and the Palestinian Authority's role has been eliminated. So, in a broader context, I think we need to see how things unfold. But to begin with, I think this is a good beginning, and this is going to be a relief for the Palestinians inside Gaza. We should not forget that there are hundreds of thousands of people in the occupied Gaza who have gone missing. We don't know at this particular point of time on whether they are under the rebels or they've been picked up by Israel or they have left Gaza. So will they be allowed to return to Gaza? There are still critical questions. We need to see how things unfold in near future.
Now, in what ways might the first phase agreement impact the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, particularly regarding uninterrupted aid delivery and the rebuilding of destroyed infrastructure?
I think to begin with, I think there would be immediate resumption of food trucks inside Gaza. I think there is an artificially built famine. We know it. Israel has deliberately used famine as a weapon of war against Palestinian. They wanted to create more and more spies inside Gaza to report against Hamas and other resistance groups, and then they wanted to create conditions where people inside Gaza are forced to leave that territory. I think with this initial agreement, my understanding is that now there is a greater possibility, and we can safely assume that there would be resumption of food deliveries. This is most likely to happen. I think it could possibly happen within hours or maybe within days. This is a positive step. At least the Palestinian hundreds of Palestinians, children particularly, in their infancy, they have died simply because they didn't have anything to eat. The hospital infrastructure have almost been destroyed, except for a few hospitals. And so far as the colleges, universities, schools, they all have been destroyed. The UN's infrastructure have been destroyed. The entire, in fact, civil infrastructure has been destroyed. People have been drinking seawater, which means that is also a lingering source of so many diseases. Again, this is a beginning point. It's a good beginning, and my understanding is that in days to come, in weeks to come, hopefully Israel is contained because of the international pressure, and Israel is not allowed to again resume genocide. And this peace agreement, no matter how weak it may be, no matter how flawed it may be, it is a setback for the extremist groups inside Israel, which is these groups are headed by none other than Prime Minister Netanyahu. We should not forget that just a few weeks ago, he has publicly advocated for the cause of a greater Israel. And he said that he's spiritually connected with the greater cause of Israel. That means that cause, at least for the time being, has been halted. 6-7 countries have been attacked by Israel for no rhyme and reason. Reason is they are expanding. And then something which people used to say, no, don't talk about greater Israel. These are the conspiracy theories. Despite the fact that there are historical documents, now there is a mainstream debate in Israel. They want to occupy more and more territories. That is why we have seen that at least 400 kilometer long square kilometer of Syria has been occupied by Israel. Instead of vacating Golan Heights, which is already illegal occupation, it has further occupied. In similar fashion, territories inside Lebanon has been occupied. In the southern part of the Lebanon, that has been occupied. And then again, West Bank, we know it. agriculture land, agriculture infrastructure has been taken over by the illegal settlers, supported by the Israel's military. That means that Israel was essentially inching towards to fulfill its greater Israel's cause. And then if you just hear the extremist groups, again I have to use the word headed by Netanyahu, they've been saying one thing, that they are going to demolish Al-Quds Sharif, the third holiest site of the Muslim. And they are going to rebuild there the so-called the third temple. And then that is why they are trying to remove all kind of hostilities from nearby neighborhood of the East Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank. So they've been pursuing that agenda. It looks like it has been halted, but it can resume again if Israel is not sanctioned for its crimes inside Gaza.
Now, lastly, to wrap it all up, what challenges could derail the transition to subsequent phases of the peace plan, such as full Israeli withdrawal and Palestinian self-governance? And how might this deal influence broader regional dynamics in the Middle East?
Well, I think the biggest challenge right now is to reconstruct Gaza. Who is going to fund it? Who is going to provide livelihood to the 2.4 million population of Gaza? This is indeed a biggest challenge. And together with it, obviously, as you rightly pointed out, the withdrawal of all troops, Israeli troops from the occupied Gaza. I think these are the two things which are extremely important. And the third, linked with this, is how Palestinian resistance groups would negotiate, or they have already negotiated, we don't know at this particular point of time, about to make it sure that political leaders like Tony Blair, they don't become the governors of the Gaza. And then there is no peace board of peace, which Donald Trump wants to head, because they have still a plan of having settlements on the coastal lines. And then we don't know, again, they may find some justification to expel people from Gaza, because this is extremist government in Tel Aviv. They will always find some justification. And I think the biggest justification they can find, that still they are not sure about, that there are still threats from Gaza, therefore the Israeli troops have to be there. And these kind of nonsensical justification they can possibly come up with. They will say that they need to disarm Hamas. Hamas, obviously they cannot disarm Hamas. Yes, it is a part of a peace plan, and I think Hamas would change its name. There would be new nomenclatures, which means Hamas would be there as a political force, as a social force, as a military force, but under different names. So they would be part of a coalition government, but certainly this time around, all the Palestinian groups would be there.
Javed Rana, thank you for joining NewsHour, and thank you for your analysis.
The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point, and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geostrategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.